Hawaii. So I was born and raised in Hawaii. I know it's like trying to break into the industry from there. I'm a gamer. I love playing games. I think that's a part of the reason like why I work at Riot is because they make some of my favorite games. My handle on everything is Warlocks. I'm on the game dev Discord. If you ever have any questions about like, oh, I want to work at Riot or I want to get into the industry or anything, just feel free to reach out and ask me, and I'll respond eventually. What this talk is about. So this talk is about sort of exposure of what working at Riot is like. Some advice on getting into games if you were interested, and my personal experience of getting into the games industry. I've only been at Riot for about 7 months, so take this all with a grain of salt. Like I am not like the expert on Riot. This is not Riot like sponsored. This is my own personal opinion of these things. And what this talk isn't about, it's not about game design. I'm a programmer. I know game design, but I'm not like a game designer. And this job is also not like how to get a job at Riot. I think that's more of like a subjective experience. And if you are interested in getting a job at Riot, like you can reach out to me and I can try to help you, but that's not what this talk is about. So I work on Legends of Runeterra, which is a digital card trading game. It's very similar to Hearthstone. It's actually a direct Hearthstone competitor. It's, I think, personally, a fantastic like take on the genre. It's in the world of League of Legends, which is Runeterra. It's got a fantastic pricing model, so it's very easy to get into. But if you ever want to check out the game, Legends of Runeterra, fantastic. So I wanted to start off in talking a little bit about like what the day-to-day of like working on Legends of Runeterra is like. And I'll start off with a few like high-level points is that we have about 150 to 200 people working on the game at a given moment. So we have a majority of the people who are working in our LA office. We have a studio in Hong Kong, and we have a ton of contractors and people working abroad or wherever on the game. And we get a huge amount of contributions every day from artists, VFX, sound designers, visual designers who are like, designing our UI and user flow, game designers who are actually designing the cards and like the content of different patches and releases, producers who get everything together and make sure it ships out on time, engineers, as well as, all of our vendors and contractors who contribute to the game. And for every person who's like an individual contributor who works on the game, we need to empower them, every person, to be able to contribute and check their work without like jumping through a bunch of hurdles, which can be, which can be pretty difficult once you get like a lot of people working on the same game. Even getting like a handful of people working on the same game can be pretty difficult. For Legends of Runeterra and for Riot in general, we always focus on having a bi-weekly patch. So every 2 weeks, there's a new release with either balance or content updates with no exceptions, mostly. Sometimes when we have like winter break or something catastrophic like a pandemic happens, this doesn't quite hold up. And specifically for Legend of Runeterra, we have huge milestone releases every 2 months. It's made in Unity with C#. It's cross-platform, so it's on Windows, mobile. This is a little more technical too. We use Git and Git LFS for version control. This might come back a little bit later in the presentation. We have a ton of automation. So we use like Jenkins and Docker to help defer some of the build work from Unity. If you've ever clicked like the build button in Unity, we defer that to outside processes that try and speed up like the amount of time it takes for someone to contribute and then see their work on build. tons of supporting tools and processes go into this with so many people involved. So the general workflow for like making a feature in Legends of Runeterra, and this might be like, oh, we're making like a reward system, or we're making like a new game mode or something, is outlined like this. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit from a article on our tech blog, which is fantastic. I'm going to butcher this, so you should definitely go read that. I'll link it in the chat, but it's linked here as well. So there are basically 5 phases or so. We have the make it work, which is like a prototyping phase. A game designer comes with basically a type or spec that's like, hey, like we want this in our game. And so usually a little strike team of engineers and designers will go through and make an initial pass about like, hey, like this is what we want our season rewards to look like. And you make it work. You rate the code, you make sure it's checked in so that it works. It's not pretty. The second pass is the art's first pass. This is typically like the artists are making a presentable version of the code or of the feature. It's not polished at all. It's to make it presentable so that when we're iterating on the feature internally, it's a little more easy to stomach and gives art a second chance to come back and do that or polish it up. Third is make it balanced. This is sort of a general term for like our authoring tools. So when we make a feature, it is almost always made with like the ability to tweak it from behind the scenes. So we have different tools that like make different season rewards or make different data that's ingestible by our engine. And that requires a whole tool suite. So when a designer is taking a look at this, they want to be able to change the content without changing the code, because that requires 1, an engineer, and 2, it requires like an update that is probably not easy to deliver to players. Fourth, make it shine is the art's final pass. So we add VFX, sound effects, things that like really make it come to life. And this, this is like the finishing this is a feature complete. Once the feature is complete, we have our own deploy and release cycles where we can stamp different builds and send that out to the general public. Here's the link for that blog. It is really good if you want like a good insight into like how exactly Legends of Runeterra is like built and made. Please check that out. I'll copy paste that into the chat so you don't have to like look at this. And I'll share my slides at some point too. So that's a feature in Legends of Runeterra. I work specifically on a team called Production Engineering, which takes care of this 5th guy right here, maybe 3 and 5 a little bit. We were focused on making sure that the game and the production of the game run as smoothly as possible. And we have a few sub-teams, which are like services, which are different like server-side things that are essential for the game running, which is like matchmaking, the store, login, user data. We have our data team, which is responsible for the like dynamic AI that we make for each game, which is super fascinating. Telemetry to know what players are doing so we can improve the game. And then the team that I'm on is build an automation and tools. And this basically takes all of the content that these like hundreds of people are producing, bundles it up, and then sends it to the players. And we have tools that facilitate every step in the process for this. So that's Legends of Runeterra is about 150 to 200 people working on this game. We have our own special marketing and some like business partners, but overall Riot Game, like Legends of Runeterra is a small subsidiary or company within the Riot Games like ecosystem, which takes care of like obvious things like legal, HR, even now it's like IP because we have our own, like we're trying to expand on the League of Legends IP. And from an engineering perspective, it's like a ton of common components that they make for us, like patching the game. They handle chat and login. We have our own like server deployment environments, like orchestration, all kinds of things that really make our lives as like an engineer much easier, or we have to worry about less things because there are a ton of things that go into a game that are that players expect that you don't quite have time to do if you're trying to focus on making a fun game. It's also like an awesome community of peers to get help from. There's tons of like incredibly smart people who have run into the same issues that you have. And it's quite a large company. Riot is like over 2,000 people. It's probably like 2,500 people. So we have people working on League, Valorant, Legends of Runeterra, all kinds of like, maybe R&D projects as well. So Riot Games as a company or like an organization takes care of a lot of the things that like we don't have time to think about or don't have the resources to spend on. And so that leads me into like building games and like where you might be, because this talk is really targeted at like you as a like college student, or you as like someone who's interested in games but not necessarily like quite there or understands it. So this might be like obvious to some people, but I hope it reiterates the points or reinforces like things that you should know before like going into this. So building games obviously requires a lot of work to make it happen. There's a ton of player expectations. Nowadays, you should have like a fully functional chat thing, and your store should work flawlessly, and your game server should be up like all the time. And depending on like the scope of your idea or like the game that you want to build and the values that like your game is like aspiring to, you take a whole village, 2,000 people, to make that happen. The larger an organization becomes, the more responsibilities of a single discipline are cut out into separate jobs or roles. Many hats. So if you are an indie developer, you're wearing all the hats. If you're working at Riot or Blizzard or EA or whatever, you're wearing a single hat, but it is a heavy hat. The larger an organization becomes, the harder it can be to collaborate between teams and individuals, which is a part of the reason why my role and my like position or my team, production engineering, exists, is to try and facilitate this. Building games is not for everyone. Even at like a big tech company or a big company like Riot, it can be pretty stressful. There is, you have a lot of passionate people who play your game, which also means that there's a lot of passionate people who yell or cry when things are not right or not working, and that can be pretty stressful, I think, comparatively to other tech industry fields. And so again, this is targeted at like people who are interested in getting into games. And some of my advice getting into the game industry is you don't need to know how to code in like C# or C++ to get into the games industry, especially if you are in a larger organization like Riot. We use a ton of different programming languages, and there are a ton of different like disciplines out there. I think when I first started in the industry, I was using JavaScript and I was using TypeScript and different like languages. So like, don't be intimidated if you're like, you don't feel like you know how to code, or you know how to do a specific skill, because I know there's some artists and non-technical or non-engineer people in here, but like don't feel like you need to know a specific skill to get into the industry, because there's a wide array of different positions to get into. And likewise, you don't need to be intimate with like game engine architecture. It helps to get into the game industry, but there are like player support positions and server positions and all kinds of different positions that like are not immediately touching the game engine or doing things with the game engine. Yeah. One thing that I will say is that you really should, no matter what position you are, you should feel really passionate about games. And you should have the desire to make games better in any way that you can contribute, which, you know, if you're getting in as a support role or as a QA role, like you really need to care about like the quality of the game, or like supporting people. Or if you're an engineer, like you really want to be like passionate about how your work ultimately affects players, because that's the name of the game. And this is like, if you take one thing away from this talk or from this slide, like find one meaningful way to contribute to like a game. And that could be anything. That could be like writing tests or writing documentation, or you know, writing like a specific piece of code. Like find one way that you can contribute and like really own that. If you're like an expert on this particular like way of doing things, that is like what people look for, or that's what people hire for. You start making games. Like if you're waiting for like a class to like start and like teach you how to make games, I think you should not do that. You should just start making games. If you really love games, just start doing it. Go to a game jam, game dev jam, or find some tutorials online or something, and just start hacking, because you'll pick up the skills, and you'll realize like what you'll start to understand what you don't know, and that can be really hard. And here's a little bit about my journey so far into games. I have a slightly non-traditional background. I didn't go to school for games in particular. My brothers and I, we started a game studio about 6 years ago. We didn't know programming, we didn't know art, we didn't know anything. We just made games for about 3 years. We didn't make any money, and hardly anyone played our games, but I think it gave us a taste, and it certainly gave me some expectations of like how difficult it can be to make games. From there, I decided to learn web development because it was sort of the easier like job to get into. I went through a boot camp, which is defunct now. It's called Dev League, but they did a really good job. I met some people there that I got my first job in traditional tech, working for some like web applications. So I acquired some skills in front end and back end, which eventually would help to boost my confidence and ability to do game development. And while I was doing this, I was studying some game development in my spare time. And you know, I wasn't doing it like hardcore like for the entire time. But you know, if you find yourself like playing games a lot or something, like take an hour or two to do a tutorial on game development. Game studios, even like Riot, need all kinds of skills. So I applied for a game studio in San Francisco that was looking for a web developer, which I had skills in because it was easier to get skills that way. And once I was at the game studio doing web development, I stretched out into actually writing game code in the same studio because I had proven that, you know, I had done my own thing with web development. And for non-engineer people, I think the lessons here are still the same. Like, if you really want to be like a character artist, or you want to be like, you want to work in a particular field in the games industry, like you try to get in different ways that you can, like be an environment artist, or like be, sometimes you got to start off with QA, and like prove that your skills in that are like they show soft skills, like being able to communicate and work effectively, and you can find an opening to get into the position that you actually want to do. So also networking, very important. While I was at the game studio, the games industry is pretty small. It's kind of crazy, actually, like how for how many like people play games, there's like a lot of the same people float around the industry. So when I was working at the game studio, networked a lot. I met people who worked at Riot. I worked with people who eventually worked at Riot, which is how I eventually got to like, I applied to Riot because I was confident in my abilities. And then I started at Riot during the pandemic, which was pretty okay. Yes. And so that's where I'm here. And now I work at Riot on production engineering, and it's been a great experience so far. If you are considering working in the games industry, I sort of like apply to Riot. I think it's always like worth a shot to come out here. They take really good care of their employees, and I've worked with some of the smartest people I think I've ever worked with. As far as like how they treat people, it is a large company, so there's a large campus in Santa Monica. It has a lot of the things you would expect from like a big FANG company, which are like free meals and yeah, I think free meals is the big one for me. We have like a PC bong inside of Riot where you can go and play games. But it also, Riot's like, I think some of those philosophies on like keeping talent or keeping people at Riot is that they're really invested into growing people. So if you ever come and like work at Riot, you should expect that a part of your compensation is being grown, or like trying to find your deficiencies and increase them. So anyways, that's probably a fire hose of information. And I really wanted to like leave this more open to Q&A because I wasn't quite sure what people want to know or what kinds of questions you have. So I want to take this time and open up for Q&A.
I'm going to enable everybody to unmute themselves, but again, please only one person at a time if you have a question. Also, it might be more ideal if you just post your question into the chat. So let me change those permissions right now. Okay, so please go ahead and ask him any questions you may have. Don't be shy.
Okay, what do I do for Rito? So specifically, like, I work on the game Legends of Runeterra on production engineering. I'm a tools engineer, so I make different excuse me. I make different tools for our production process. So if you've ever used like Git before, our entire game is in a monorepo in Git, which is pretty frightening sometimes because Git LFS and like Git are traditionally not the immediate choice when you look at version control for a video game. Merge conflicts are kind of a nightmare. So we have a tool that is sort of like a lens over Git and makes Git simpler to use for non-engineers or people who are not used to Git. And so effectively I write like a Git GUI for that. I also work on leak prevention tools. So we try not to leak things in our compiled binaries. Let's see. I hope that answers your question. How much do you play other non-retail games? I play non-retail games pretty frequently. I've been playing a lot of League recently, but I am like a big MMO person personally, so I've been playing a lot of like Final Fantasy 14. I play a ton of Super Smash Bros. I'm a Captain Falcon main. I love Monster Hunter World. So I would say it's about 50-50, like 50% like video games, 50% non-video games. How did I network towards Riot? So I was pretty fortunate when I worked at my previous game studio. It's called Fogbank Entertainment, which is closed now, unfortunately. I met some pretty talented people who ended up working at Riot, and they gave me a referral after we worked together. What is your educational background? So I went to UH for pre-business. I was planning on going for accounting. In my junior year, my brother suggested that we pursue making a mobile game studio. And so I dropped out and I pursued that. And then after the year, after we were sort of done making games together, I evaluated my options. I was like, should I go back to school or should I like try and this boot camp thing, which was a viable option back then. I don't know how viable boot camps are now. I certainly would have loved to go to school for software engineering if I had my choice from the beginning, but I didn't know about games or software engineering. So yeah. How did you know that this is something you wanted to do, working for a gaming company or helping out in development for game companies? That's a good question. It can be really hard. Like, it can be really hard to know what it's actually like to work for a game company until you like really work there. But I would say that like, if you love like playing games and you love like talking about games with like other people, there's a good chance that you're like a good culture fit for people or for like a game company. Like if you spend a significant amount of your spare time like playing games and like talking to people who play games, and you like software development or for artists like the process of creating art, then I think you are potentially a good culture match. And I would say you just got to throw your hat in the ring and see if you like it. Do game jams, like make games. That's the only way that you're going to know how, like what it feels like to like make a game. Make games, just make games. How was your interview like? And can you apply for distance working? Like can I style apply here in Hawaii to work? So I'll answer the second part first. Remote working is no. Like obviously right now we're in COVID times. Remote is required. No one is working in the office, but I think when we return to normal, whatever that means, they expect most people to be back in the office, and that's. I think different people have different philosophies on this. Games in particular can be pretty hard to manage remotely. I don't think a lot of people do it successfully, at least at the scale that Riot does it, and so they're thinking about it, but I would expect, or I would tell you to expect that, like, if you're applying at Riot, you're probably going to have to move to Los Angeles. And then the first part of the question was, how was your interview like? It's pretty thorough. I don't know if you're familiar with like what the FANG like tech company interviews are like, but it's similar. It was a barrage of interviews. I think I had like 6 separate interviews to get into Riot. You have like a basic screen, you have a phone screen, you have like a behavioral interview, you have a technical screen, and then they bring you onto the on-site, which is an all-day affair with about 6 different interviews within that day. And then you hear back from them. But I had a positive experience. Everyone was very very nice and like positive. And I would say that there's a lot of material out there that you can study to like to do well in the interview. Interviewing is a skill, and Riot Games is not an exception for how you train for that skill. Okay. What does a good day at work look like to you? And conversely, what does a bad day at work look like to you? Yeah, that's a great question. I will say a bad day looks like my calendar is filled with meetings and I have a lot of emergent work, which is basically like something catches on fire, figuratively, where something's broken and I have to go and fix it that I didn't expect it to do, and it interferes with the scheduled work that I have. A good day for work for me is like all of the scheduled work that I had planned for that day just happens without interruption. And I think you'll see that pretty universally around the games industry. Is like uninterrupted work is a good day. What server do you play on for Final Fantasy 14? I am on Siren. I'm on Siren, or is that the data shard? Yeah, I think I'm on Siren. I have to check. What games did you work on in your indie studio? So for the first, when my brothers and I made like a game studio, we made a bunch of shitty games that actually are not, they're not even on the App Store anymore. They were really, really low quality, but we did what we could. We tried our best. We actually made a League of Legends like fan game about 6 years ago, which is basically like a match 3, but with like different League of Legends champions. So like you really don't need like a super complicated game to get started. Like just make like a match 3 like for mobile, easy. Did your brother also continue in game design? No, my brothers both left to pursue music. They're actually in Los Angeles now. So they left the game world entirely. When it comes to your portfolio, what did you have when applying? So unfortunately for you guys, I will say that experience is king. Like it's, I think, unparalleled in what like ranks as far as like stats for a portfolio, because you've actually like worked on and shipped a game. Like that counts a lot, because some of the issues that you run into are only things that you run into when you make a game for realsies. Other than that, I had like a few like pet projects that I was working on, like some game design things, or like some like new technology that I wanted to experiment with. I would say that for a student like you, I would say that like having like shipped a game or like made a game that's like public, and having that code or your contribution public and like available, it's something that you really need to have in your portfolio. What would you say gave you the edge in the application process? I think there's two things. I was fortunate enough to have a referral from someone I worked with, so I got to skip the initial tech screen. But the initial tech screen is not that hard. I think the second thing is that like I personally am a really good culture fit for what they were looking for. It was I play a ton of Riot Games, and they care a lot about your behavior, like how you handled previous situations. So like what happens when your boss or your like teacher like gave you feedback on a thing, like how did you respond to that? And I think I personally am a good fit for that, or for what they were looking for. Also experience definitely helps. I like the previous studio that I was on prototype to pre-production to production to shipping the game. And those are all very unique like stages in a game that are hard to come by if you're not actively working on something. Good Book says, how do you suggest we create connections with people in the industry, especially now with COVID? That's Aether. Oh, yes. Aether is the data show that he, and Siren is the game server. Yeah, this one's hard. Personally, it's all sort of uncharted territory as far as this goes. But I mean, some of the most networked people in the games industry are people who like post on forums or who have like a social media presence and like are actively engaged in the different social media circles in games. So like if you go on the Unity forums, there's a big Unity Discord server that like lots of people post their work on. If you're constantly like being involved in those communities, that's something that like eventually will catch the eye of someone who needs to hire someone, or they're looking for someone who's like looking to get into the industry. So definitely look out for those like online communities. How high is your GSP in Smash Bros for Captain Falcon? I decayed a little bit, but I like 2 weeks ago I was at 6 million. How much did you make from your games in the App Store? I'm at 4.6 million right now. So, yeah. How much did you make from your games on the App Store? Did you make anything from it? Okay. So we made 3 games. Our first was basically a dud. Like it was our entry into thing. The second one, because it was sort of like a fan game that was tied to League of Legends, we had a lot of people download it and like play it. We had like 100,000 people playing the game on Android and iOS. We didn't make any money. Like we made money from ads in the game, but it was negligible to like how much work we put in it. Like a couple $100 or something. Other than C#, what coding languages would you suggest to learn? Python, JavaScript, Go. I think in order, I would say C#, depending on what you want to do, C++ or Python. Then the other, Go is really popular. Java is still pretty popular. Lots of the like very popular programming languages you'll find everywhere. Learn how to use different engines versus different programming languages. Stick to one engine. You can go really in depth into a single engine and not do it. Like I know people who've been using like the Unity engine for like 10 years and they still don't like, they wouldn't consider themselves like experts on it. And different programming languages, I think definitely learn more than one. You want to have like more exposure to different kinds of programming languages, but like just focus on one. Riot's university program. I'm sorry, Christian. I don't really know too much about the university program. If you're also talking about like the internship program, I talked with my colleague who went through the program, and she had a really good time. They like it's like a paid internship, and you're learning a lot, and it basically sets you up to have like a good job at Riot eventually, maybe. Does getting chat restricted lower my chances? I don't know. Behavior is certainly like a standard that Riot holds of its employees. So maybe if you're playing, like, put a different summoner name if you're chat restricted. And wait, would you say your web software engineering counted for anything in your application process, especially as a tooling guy? Or do you think Riot Games values game engineering above all else? Also for game networking, going to GDC and big events like E3. Yes. Okay, so the first part of that is like web software engineering counted for anything particular? No, I think it's like it helped for my first job in the games industry. Definitely, it helped because they were making their tools in web tech, And you'll see that this is actually a trend that's happening around a lot of the games industries. They're trying to introduce a little bit more of the web UI technology, like React and TypeScript and things to that. And those are pretty things, like really easy technologies to get into and like become proficient in. And honestly, like I think it's a good way to get in. Like if you want to, it's really easy to make tools, and you can make tools really easy with like TypeScript and React. Rito values games, or do you think Rito values games engineering above all else? Definitely not. They value behavior, like how you react to situations, and they value like software engineering fundamentals. So you should be very familiar with algorithms, data structures, general not game architecture, like object-oriented architecture, and like how you would architect like a software application. And those are skills like you accrue as either like a student or like working in the industry. So as long as you're strong on your data structures, algorithms, and like code architecture, you should be okay. And yes, for game networking, go to GDC and E3. You'll meet lots of cool people there. But COVID, so they have online versions of them, but I haven't tried that, so I don't have a like opinion on that. Can we add you on FF11 14? Yes, you can. I'll with the other things, I'll put my my screen name in the chat, and we can hang out. If we were involved in game modding, indie game dev, where should we mention when applying? Oh, that's awesome, dude. Game modding is great. So that's like a really great way to like get into games too. Like, game modding is sort of like the lifeblood of new game development. Like all of the big like genres spawned from game modding, and it shows that you have a competency for how like a game engine works. So if you don't have experience, I would put that as like your projects on your projects list. Like highlight that. Like this is like my game mod, especially if you're proud of it and you're passionate about it. That should be very high up on the list. What's your best personal experience at Rito? You said the culture is investing in getting people to be the best selves. Can you expand on that further? How do they do that? Yeah. Man, it's I started during COVID, so I haven't been to the campus yet. I've been remote entirely. But I work on the team, and they are particularly like empathetic people. They have, I think, gone out of their way to like make sure that I felt comfortable and like had a good experience like coming into Riot. And every week our team, like production engineering, we for an hour every Friday during work we play games together. So we'll play like party games, or play like a stupid golf game that sucks. We'll play it together for like an hour and just like laugh and like bond over that. And that has been one of the best things for me at Riot. And Riot encourages that. Like they really encourage like playing games and like being like caring about the culture. As far as like Riot itself investing into people being their better selves, like that is your manager's job. They are tracking that you are growing as expected, which are dictated by rubrics and benchmarks and different things. But my colleague says to me, like, if your manager is not doing that for you, they are cheating you out of like your compensation, because that is something that like you actively should be doing, and they should actively be poking you to do. What advice would you give to people or students in college who haven't developed a game before but would like to explore game development? Like, where should they start when exploring a possible career pathway to game development in the future? Yeah, it's unique for everyone. It's hard. I totally understand like the it can be pretty intimidating trying to like just build a game or to just like get into game development. But you really just need to do that. Like go to a game jam and like meet with people and like be forced to make a game within the weekends. You'll see a little bit of what it's like. You can game mod if there's like a game that you really like that supports modding. Like make a mod because it really will force you to learn like the internals of like how a game works. So I would say like if you just don't have any experience in like game dev and you're like I don't know if this is right for me and you're like I don't want to do this, like 3 things like go to a game jam, like just force yourself to go and be on a team and participate. 2, mod a game. Or 3, like find your favorite game or like a really simplified version of your game and make it. Or do something like that. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of going from Hawaii to the game industry? Any culture shock? Stuff that was different than you expected? Any tips to prepare? And then I'll say that after. Let's see. It wasn't too bad. I feel like, especially when and I will answer this question. I relocated to San Francisco, and then from San Francisco, I relocated to Los Angeles for work. So I live in Los Angeles now to work for Riot. But moving from Hawaii to like California is not too big of a culture shock. I think it's kind of nice actually because people just like people from Hawaii. Like I got a lot of conversations started just because they were like, "Oh, you're from Hawaii! Like I love Hawaii," and blah 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 blah. And I think that like in the games industry, people are particularly empathetic and interested in like storytelling, which I think Hawaii is pretty good at. Pretty good at storytelling. God, it was the game industry is notorious for long hours and like crunch, and every studio tries to mitigate that at some point. Some studios are more open about it. I've heard bad stories from like Epic and Naughty Dog are particularly like 2 studios that are really crunch studios. But every single studio has some crunch. Like there's going to be a deadline. It's going to be a hard deadline because players expect like a release to happen, and it was something that like I knew going in, and it happens. I think studios try to mitigate it because people get burnt out, but it's expect like that to be a reality. Like you may have to crunch. And then Ed is saying plugging Global Game Jam, which I think is in January, which I believe is where I met Alex for the first time. That's correct. We did meet each other at Global Game Jam. It is awesome. It is lots of fun. It's one of the bigger game jams. It's the biggest game jam. Participate. It's fun. Did you really relocate? Yes, I relocated. And yeah. Oh, those are really great questions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for all the questions. In fact, there was a lot of questions. If anybody, we still have a little bit more time, so if anybody wants to ask me for questions, you are free to do so. We'll only like a few more though. But in the meantime, to kind of touch on or add on to what Al has shared with us, he mentioned a lot of times go to game jams. He said that dozens and dozens of times. He's absolutely correct in that sense. He pointed out Global Game Jam. I've gone to Global Game Jam before. I've done it the last, I think, 3 years now. It's great fun. It's really good time. So really good experience for me as well. Those happened in January. They were in person. They have like sites around the world. There's a Honolulu site. This year, I've been given the heads up that it's going to be online. I don't know the full details yet. I'm sure they'll tell us later. But yeah, so participate. It's great fun. You can do it on your own. I would encourage you to do it with a team. It's much more entertaining that way. If you don't want to wait around for Global Game Jam, you don't have to because there's tons of game jams you can find online all the time. Itch.io, you may have heard of this website. They have tons of game jams that you can find there. They vary in length. Sometimes they're like an hour long, sometimes they're a day long, sometimes they're a week long, even a month long. There's tons of different jams you can find there throughout the year. Um, let's see what else. So for those of you who are
On the
wondering, oh, go
on
ahead.
the on the on the note of jams, I also want to point out we did add a new resource to the game dev Discord. So Andrew Wang is now posting the game jams that he's participating in that have his interest into the Discord whenever like he's going to participate in one. And so like he's our local champion jammer. He's at all the jams. He does a jam almost every weekend.
Yeah, dude, that guy's
So,
crazy.
yeah, he really is. And so like if you join the Discord, then you should be able to see jams that have at least one local participant that you're able to kind of interact with and stuff like that. And yes, Global Game Jam is online. I help organize the local Global Game Jam site. We're starting to ramp up planning. Obviously, this is the first time that it's ever been online only, so a lot of things to sort out, which is why we haven't announced yet. But we are planning on running it, just trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yep, thank you, Ed, for the update on that. For those of you who are saying if you're not sure if you want to get into games, you want to get a taste of game design, or how do you start getting experience, the Game Dev Club that I am the president of, I'll re-plug in that information. I need to go get it. It's all the way at the top of the chat. But yeah, please join the club. We're doing meetings where we discuss like, okay, certain design elements to video games. And next week's meeting is one I'm particularly excited for. First time we're going to do it where I'm actually asking you guys to come and bring me, as Al said, just a very simple, small game mechanic idea, and then we can all go and brainstorm that and figure out ways to make it more fun, more interesting, and anything else to it. That being said, that meeting is, you guys got to bring the ideas. I'm not going to bring anything to this one. You guys got to bring the ideas. If you don't bring an idea, then, well, we're going to sit around for an hour in silence. And that's going to be a very fun time. Anyway, I'm going to let this question get answered.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Well, at least for a Global Game Jam, you need no experience. And most game jams, that's the case. So like for Global Game Jam in particular, we care more about the relationships that are made than the games that come out. So it's about finding people that you like working with, and then you can learn throughout the year and come back better for the next jam. And then obviously we're doing things all year with the Game Dev Club, so you're able to beef up your skills there.
Yes. What Ed said.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
I also want to go back to something that Alex said earlier. So games take a village to make. So you shouldn't be trying to, I mean, if you can, if that's your thing, you can try to do all of it yourself. But one of the things that I've been doing since graduation has been trying to develop that village here at the University of Hawaii. So we just ran a series of workshops on creating art assets for use in game engines with the ACM department. So animators now know how to make video game assets. We also have the adaptive game music composition and theory class. So now there's 15 people on campus that know how to make music for video games. So if you think about that, that's kind of like the minimal trifecta. You have visual arts, audio arts, and software engineering to be able to make games. And so right there, you have tiny little teams, and we're trying to incorporate that into our local game jams as well. But you should be looking to try to like make friends right here on campus, and even like for stories, right? There's an English department, there's a writing department in the Hawaiian Studies area. There's a film writing at the ACM department. So really take advantage of your time in the university to try to create those networks and those teams of collaborators that you're able to work with to make truly amazing games. And hopefully Alex agrees there.
Yeah, definitely. You're probably going to be wearing like a producer hat and like trying to organize like a team of people to like work on the same thing, and that's like a very useful skill in the industries. Like if you can pull together people to like dedicate their time to work on something in particular. But make friends, network. You never know who's gonna end up like working somewhere that you might like be like, oh hey, like this guy works at Blizzard, this girl works at EA or something in the future. So make those connections now.
Alex works at Riot. Come give a talk.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if there are no more questions, thank you everyone for coming. Again, if you want to get more involved, the Game Dev Discord server is a great place to start. You're welcome to have open conversations or organize teams for making a game or anything, any reason there, or just ask for feedback and whatnot. I know it feels like we're isolated because we're out here in Hawaii, but we are much more connected than you would think. We have a lot of good contacts out there who are connected to us. And even within the university, our own little local ecosystem here, like even though I myself am not a professional like Alex, I still have experience with game development on an indie kind of level. I can still, I took the game design class, so I can still tell you like, oh, this is like a good idea, or I can help kind of fine tune your focus of your game or something along those lines. Granted, you take what I say with a grain of salt because I'm not a professional, but I could help you if you are coming from like an amateur background or something like that. And that being said, you also have people like Ed White who are also experienced as well, and tons of other people that I can forward you to if I can't answer your question. Yeah, so thank you everyone. Thank you, Al, for giving this talk. It was awesome to have someone like you come in and share your knowledge with us. So as Al has said, he's on the Discord server. He's open to any questions. You can ping him. Try not to over ping him too much because he is busy throughout the day. Other than that, I think that's about it. So please come to next week's meeting if you are able to. Remember to bring an idea. Otherwise, it's going to be the worst meeting ever. And yeah, I will see all of you. I'll stick around in case anybody has any questions about anything. Game dev club related, not necessarily for Alex. So yeah, thank you everyone, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me and organizing this, Justin and Ed, and I'll see everyone later.
Bye. All right, thank you.